Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the day 5 of the free week in software quality assurance testing. We have done a great job so far for the previous days. Let's quickly go over what we have covered. We talked about testing basics, right? And what is software testing? We actually created a test case. We executed the test case, but manually. Why automate? Let's answer this question. You might be asked this question during the interviews as well. Why do you think we need test automation? Right? Can't we just do everything manually? So the answer to this question actually goes back to 3 different factors, which is time, right? Why time? Because automation is all about saving time, being more efficient, and actually decreasing the amount of time that is being spent for the testing phase, right? When they plan the whole, the application development period, they actually take into account and then count, how many days we actually need to test, especially, during a waterfall type of methodology. We'll talk about that certainly, in detail in the actual classes, what is waterfall and what's agile and how that works. So in the time is always a big constraint. It's a limitation that everybody's concerned about. You always have a deadline and you have to meet that deadline, the timeline, not you specifically, but the whole team actually, right? And everybody impacts the other team as well. So time is a big factor that you want to handle, you want to get ahead of the timeline, and therefore automation is helpful. And of course, when we were talking about time, that's that converts into money because each hour for the company is additional cost to pay for the consultants, for the employees, and so on. Now the resources. So whenever you automate the process, a certain process, you're actually, creating additional time for your employees or consultants. Now, instead of them sitting and executing, running the test cases, now they can do something else, right? So, the test cases are running automatically overnight, after work hours, for example, and or during the daytime. And then so in that time that was supposed to be spent for the test automation is saved. I mean, test execution is saved, and then your testers or other personnel can actually work on certain other tasks, which needs human touch. And we'll get to that question next. So is 100% automation possible? That's another frequently asked question. Like, is everything going to be, automated, right? So do you think that we should automate all our test cases? That's question, certainly may come up during, as that interview. So, and also there's a concern like, if I'm a manual tester, am I going to lose my job eventually? So is the automation completely replacing the manual testing in the future? What can we expect? So the answer to such question is that we need to clearly understand what automation can do and what automation cannot do, right? So and also I personally would like to use checking instead of testing when we talk about automation, because automation is more of repetition of the steps that you manually created, right? So it's not really coming up with new scenarios, right? There's this robot or the script that you created is not going to look at the screen and say, oh, how about I'm going to check this other scenario? Oh, look, I didn't notice there's some other thing. There's some new scenario that we might be missing. There is no way, at least at the moment, and I'm not seeing it in the near future, that the code will write itself, and then that code that you wrote will actually automatically create new, new scenarios. That would be now we're talking about artificial intelligence here, which is, I would say, beyond, or it's just our imagination at the moment. So, and even if we were there, there's always going to be a need for manual testers, because it would be very difficult to replace the human curiosity and attention to details, right? So, so therefore, manual testing is very important. Like it is, I would say it is more important than automated testing, because automated testing is not going to find you new defects. It will not. I mean, it's just there to repeat the same steps again and again, just making sure that the test cases that passed still passes, right? Again, it just keeps passing while the code is changing. And that's sort of the idea. So the answer to this question is manual testing, will always be there, because, purpose of those two different parts of the testing industry are totally different. They help each other, but they don't replace each other, right? All right, so what can you actually automate? So what do you automate? What steps, what parts of your daily tasks will you be actually automating? So first, your test steps. Remember, in Azure DevOps, we created a test case about login feature, right? We were entering values into the input box. Well, first of all, we launched the browser, right? We navigated to a certain web address, website, and then we entered some values in the user field. And so those were test steps. Click on a button, that's a step. So that can be automated. And then we talked about comparing the expected conditions, which are usually coming from the requirement documents, against the actual results that you observe when you're executing your test cases. That comparison can be done automatically, right? What else? You can take screenshots automatically. Now that's a big one, because usually it is time consuming using this snipping tool, and then taking the screenshot, coming up with a name, saving it somewhere, and then you forget where you saved it, and each time come up with a new name. So screenshots, that's a really cool part of a test automation. Then you can pass or fail your test status automatically. So if you remember, when we were manually executing the test cases, we were actually clicking like pass, and maybe fail, right? So that can be done automatically as well. And also test reports. Now, generating test reports are usually the task of your test lead, QA lead, or QA manager. They prepare those weekly status reports. I personally do. And that's for the senior management. But as a QA tester, sometimes you will be asked to prepare daily reports or weekly reports about how many test cases you have executed, how many test cases passed, right? So what's the percentage, and all that kind of numbers, metrics, as we call. So, and test automation can help with that as well, right? So you can automatically generate reports too. So one thing that you need to learn, or you need to be introduced to before you actually jump into automating anything, is, apart from Python or any programming language, there's a very simple language. Also, let's call that as a language as well. That's called HTML. It's a hypertext markup language. So it looks something like Lego blocks, actually, right? So it is. It starts with the HTML tag, and you might have seen that on the page from time to time. But it's actually hidden behind what you see, and I'm going to show you where that code is. And as part of our courses, we definitely give you a separate, introduction and basic knowledge about what is HTML and what are those elements that you're dealing with, so that you can actually interact with those elements. So each visible element, like an input field where you are actually entering your username, is one of the elements of the HTML structure or skeleton of the page, right? So and it will certainly come with a practice, but I would say this is definitely something much easier and simpler when you compare it to anything like Python or SQL. All right, so what are we going to learn today, or we're going to practice today, right? So we're going to learn how to launch the browser, and go to a website, launch the browser, go to a website automatically, and then find certain elements there. Find elements. Why do we find elements? To be able to interact with those elements, right? Because you're trying to automatically perform tasks. So you don't think about it when you're doing it manually. You just say, okay, I see this login button, let me click on it. But when you're doing it automatically, now you have to actually, write a script that finds that element first, and then perform that click action. So that's what we're going to try to accomplish. This is a very, very basic, I would say, steps or a workflow of an automation, but in actual test automation, things are a bit more, I would say, in a different level, such as there are different frameworks that we're going to create together. But that would be a bit early to talk about, during introductory classes. So we're going to keep it simple today. And we will start from launching the browser, basically. All right, so let's go to the tool that's called Visual Studio Code, right? So this tool is called as a Visual Studio Code, and you're going to write your code on the top here, and on the bottom you have a terminal. All right, so we're going to utilize the terminal a lot today, so that you can kind of visualize what's going on with each step, right, behind the scenes, what actions these Python or the automation script is actually taking. So first step here would be, I would ask you to sort of ignore what's written on top here. Well, the purpose here is that this is more of what I would say part of preparing your environment. Think of it that way, right? So you'll certainly learn how to write that part of the code as well. But as part of this lesson, let's just think it that way, that all the installations are done in your computer. And we have provided you instructions, and then walked you through, and then you installed the Python in your computer. You installed everything that's needed to proceed, right? So first step here, let's just look at this line 5, right? Line 5, as you can see, I am creating a variable. I'm creating a variable called driver. And that driver is referring to a browser. Now I could name it a browser as well, because I'm creating that variable. So if you remember yesterday, we created several variables like age, right, and name. We created a message variable yesterday with Python, and then message variable, we made it equal to hello world, right? And the concept of variable was to kind of refer to some value, to have, it's sort of like a container to keep the value or certain information. But in this case, what we're saving or referring to is the browser, right? So, but by convention, or like it's usually industry-wide recommendation or convention, is you just call it as a driver. But think of it as a browser, right? So we're going to run the code, and the expectation here is that this is supposed to launch the browser. This is supposed to launch the browser. So to run the code, I'm going to go ahead and type in this code here. So again, you don't have to worry about this. You're going to learn every step. Just pay attention what comes up. Right? As you can see, we just launched the Firefox browser. Now I'm going to take the browser on the right-hand side here, and I'm going to take the code on the left-hand side so that we know what's going on the left and on the right, right? That will be more, I would say, straightforward for you to see what's happening. So now I'm in the terminal. Now, normally you would be writing all your scripts on the actual coding section. But for learning purposes, it's best to see it step by step. Right? So that's what we're going to try to do. So now we created the driver, right? Now we have access to the driver. Now the first step after you launch the browser would be to go to a certain website, right? To go to a certain website. So in the method or the code or the, think of it as a function or built-in sort of action to get to a website would be get, right? So you're saying, browser, get me to the certain address, right? So get me to a certain address, and let me just copy and paste this address from here, right? So then copy and paste. So here we go. So what I'm trying to say here is that, okay, I'm saying, driver, get me to this particular website. Now look, I'm putting the quotation marks here because it's a string. Right? We covered this yesterday. Whenever you're dealing with text, it has to be within the quotation mark. So now pay attention to the right-hand side. Here we go. You see? So let's quickly repeat. .get. So whenever you say driver .get, the purpose of that method is to go to a website. Now, usually you do that manually, right? If you're writing a manual test case, that's something that we just basically automated. Now, driver, as I said, it's a browser. Now I can do some other actions here, like refresh, right? So driver.refresh. See, it's sort of plain English though, but it comes with practice that you will start memorizing those methods. Okay, if I type in driver.refresh, it's gonna refresh the page, right? You see, just refresh the page. So now, what if I want to go to another web page here? Let's try Google, right? Let's go to Google. All right, so let me just get the link of the Google from here. So I'm just gonna post it, paste it, and then let's go to Google. Here we go. We just went to Google now, right? So can I go back? I mean, to go back, usually manually, you would click this back button, right? But here, we can do that with a code. So driver.back, but don't forget your parentheses, you see? And that would be what? That would be a syntax issue, right? Sort of, you're forgetting your back button, I mean, the parentheses. So you will kind of get used to it only through practice. Let's say there's no other way around it, and that's why you need homeworks, and you need to perform your homework, right? So the back, we just check the back, and then you can go to forward as well. As you can see, driver.forward, it's gonna take us back to the to that Google page. Now there are other interesting things here that you can access other than getting taking you back and forth or going to a web page. We can also access you see that on top of every tab, you have this title here. You see here, it says Google. See, we can get that title here, but by writing driver.title, you see that it gave me this title as Google. See that? So if I go back now, right? If I go back to this page and then repeat the same code, driver.title, now it will give me the swag labs here. Because if you look at the top of this tab, right, browser tab, it gives swag labs here. Okay, I'm getting some questions. I'll get back to this questions a little later. So, all right. Now, the next step here would be to also check another interesting method here, which would be you can also maximize the window. So usually, you know, as soon as you launch the browser, you maximize it. You know, that's sort of part of the test that you will be performing. As you can see, that's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and maximize. You see, I just maximize it. Now I can also minimize it. Let's minimize the window. All right, that's it. It's gone, right? You just minimize the window and it's all the way somewhere here at the bottom. Now, you can also close it as well, right? So to close, again, it's plain English. We're just going to go ahead and say driver.close. You can also say driver.quit as well. So we're going to go driver.close and it's gone. And it's gone, right? So what we have learned? We have learned that, yes, with the automation, with the Python and with the help of the Selenium, that's open source automation tool. You can think of it that way. So, and an open source means it's free. There are other test automation tools which are paid. So for those you have to pay. So, and the reason why Selenium is so much in demand and popular currently is because it's open source, right? And it's also compatible with all the browsers and also many of the programming languages. So far we have learned just to open the page, right? Open the browser, go to a web page and perform certain actions like going back, forward and back and so on. Now let's go further and then try to identify or catch the elements and then enter values and perform click and so on, right? So to do that, same thing, I'm going to run the script again. And I'm expecting the browser to pop up. So let's keep it on there. So we have it on the left-hand side. So again, we're going to go to the page, driver.get. Let me get to that this time. Let's get to Google again. Right. So interesting thing to perform in Google actually would be, let's go to Google. Interesting action to perform in Google here would be to search, right? Can we actually automatically search? Can we enter some value in this field? So to do that, you would actually first have to identify this element. Now, to identify, and in test automation, we call that as object recognition, or also spying, right? You're sort of spying on the object. You're trying to find and catch that object or element. So you're going to right click, and then there's this option here that says inspect. So there's a layer that you probably have never seen before if you're new to QA. So you're going to click and say inspect, and that's going to open this, ugly sort of window here that's not always, let me actually enlarge it for a second. And on the left-hand side here, you see this, sort of like an arrow or a pointer. This is like your, like a spying tool, right? You can think of it as a Sherlock Holmes, right? So you click on it and it's gonna find everything. So if you go through, this is like a geometric sort of elements with height and width, and this is how actually developers coded and designed it together, right? Just like you would design your home, your walls, right? So they also design it, and that way they put the elements in certain locations, and your job as a tester, as an automation tester, would be just spy on those objects using a tool, find them and identify them, right? And catch them basically before you interact with them, before you talk to them. So the step here would be you just go ahead and then click on a certain object, or which is input field, and it's going to highlight this element for you. Now, when it highlights this element for you, you would have to go and read this element and its content, and as I explained, you need to be introduced to HTML a little more, a bit more in detail to be able to actually start understanding how the elements are constructed. But for now, for the sake of this demo, let's just take this particular part here, and which says name equals Q. So this is basically an attribute or a feature or a description of the element, right? We call that as an attribute name and attribute value in actual test automation, but we're going to use that to catch this element, because other elements do not have the same description, sort of, right? So let's just keep it on the right hand side. Now, to find that element, again, it's plain English. So there's a method called find element, right? So you're just going to write in find element, and then by what? How do you want to find the element? We're going to find the element by name, because if you go back to this particular attribute, we used name here, right? Said name equals to Q. So we're just going to go ahead and put Q here, right? This is how we were, and I'm just going to create a variable here and save it to a variable. Call it as search field. So search field equals to drive dot find element by what? How do we want to, how are we actually finding the element? We're finding the element by its name. And the name of the element turns out it's just the letter Q. And hit enter. Okay, so we can close it. We don't need that anymore. So now we have access to this particular element. Now we have access. The next step here would be, we want to enter some text, right? You want to enter some text, and the method in test automation to enter some text would be send keys, right? Send keys, as if you're sort of sending or pressing the keys on your keyboard. That's sort of the idea here. So let's say we want to enter any search word. So it could be, QA, engineer, interview, questions, right? So if I hit enter, you see what just happened? So we automatically entered the value or the text into an input field. So this is basically what's happening whenever the test automation engineers are writing code. They're trying to automate the manual steps right? And you could test it manually, but you could also convert it into a script that would do that task automatically for you, right? So now, can we actually what else can be done here, right? So here, okay, so this is one thing. Now we can also, what we can also do here is, right, so we have, and as you can see, I just clicked enter as well, right? After I actually, input the text, there was another line of code that I put in here that says, okay, now I want to hit enter on the keyboard. So let's just let's just check the interesting attribute of the driver, which is title again. As you look at the top on the tab, it says QA engineer interview questions, and we have access to this particular element or information here as well. And you also have access to the name of the browser that you're using, right? If you say driver.name, it would actually tell you it's a Firefox, right? And you also have access to the current URL. Now, currently, this the URL is a bit ugly, but if we go back to the next page that we will be working on, let me just bring this over here. Okay, we don't need additional quotation marks. So if we go to this web page and then go ahead and say current URL, as you can see now, it is returning the actual web address of the page right now. So so what's the next step that we will be doing now, right? So now we want to enter a username, and we want to enter a password, and we want to click on the login button. So let's try to do that. So to do that, again, we have to start from finding the element, right? Before you interact with an element, before you are able to enter a text into an input field, or before you can click on a login button, first you have to identify that element, or what we call in test automation is you have to recognize, so object recognition. So again, right click, inspect. Right, so it whenever you do right click and inspect, it automatically highlights this element in the source, in the page source, or in the HTML skeleton. So then you will start looking at these key value pairs, right? ID equals the username, or class equals to something, or name equals the username. So think of it as a key value pairs, but in HTML they're called as attribute name and attribute values. So we're going to try to catch the first element that we're interested in, which is the username. So driver dot find element, right? Why driver dot? Because we're trying to find the element on that page, right? And the driver is, think of it as this web page at the moment. So we're saying driver dot on the page, let's find the element, and we're looking for the element by what? By which key or which attribute? Let's pick the ID this time, right? By ID, and it says username here. Make sure you put it inside the quotation marks. Now, I also want to assign it to a variable, and I'm just going to call it as user name field equals username field equals to this. So when I hit enter, so now I just have access to this particular to the field. So to actually enter any value now, we just can go username field dot send keys, and any data. Basically we can just say test for now, right? And hit enter. As you can see, just enter it, the value here. Now can you also clear, right, what you entered? Now it's actually good practice for the automation testers before you enter any value to clear that field, because sometimes certain values can be auto-populated from the cache of the browser. Now if you remember, if you probably have seen, if you go to a certain web page and then log in, and next time it just saves your password, or it asks you, do you want to save the password going forward, or your user credentials? And if that's the case, then you want to first clear and then enter a new value, right? Otherwise, you would just put it on top of the other one. So you can also say username dot clear. So again, most of the methods that you will be using are created in such a way so that you can memorize them easily, because engineers or developers of the programming languages are also human beings like us, and they also understand that it would be easier for everybody to memorize if you use easier language. So therefore I would say it is pretty straightforward, but it just comes with practice. So username dot clear, right? Oops, as you can see, you see what kind of error message I just received. The error message says name error, username is not defined, because it was not username, it was username field, right? Now username underscore field dot clear, it's going to clear the field for us. So let's actually go ahead and put that name back, test, and then try to inspect our password this time. We're going to inspect the password. So the steps are, again, you click on this button here, you inspect the element that you want to work with, and then you go ahead and look at those key value pairs. You found the key value pair, ID equals password, or this time we can use name equals password, for example, right? So we're going to call it as a password field, and driver dot find element, and again by what? This time we want to use name, as I said. Name, that will be password. Again, here we go, right? Let's just bring this up a little bit so that it's just clean a little bit. So then inside the password field, we're going to enter some value, send keys. What do we want to enter? Well, again, just enter test. So here we go. We entered the value as well. So the next step would be, let's identify our login button. Same steps. We're going to click on the spy icon, and then click on this element, which would be the login button. Look at the key value pairs. So let's pick the ID this time. So we're just going to say login button equals driver dot find element by ID, and the ID would be login dash button. Login dash button. So now what if I make a mistake there, right? Instead of the login dash button, I forgot, let's say, O here. So it was like login dash button, and then I forgot, I made a typo there. So what's going to happen? So here's what's going to happen. You see? So the error message that you're going to get is a no such element error. So, yesterday we, covered some of the errors that you might see, like name error or syntax error, right? So, and this is one of the errors that that you will be seeing whenever you write an incorrect script, and your script won't be able to find the element because of a typo, for example. It could be other reasons. And if we put the correct value, so it doesn't return anything. So it just saved the element there. So now we're going to go ahead and now you can guess what kind of action I will be performing. I entered the username, I entered the password. Now we want to click. Now, as I said, it is plain English, it is click, right? But make sure you have your opening and closing parentheses. This is what you use whenever you're performing any action, right? So parentheses means it's mostly an action rather than an information, right? The information is an attribute, and the actions are the methods or functions. So let's click on it, and you got the message here, right? You got this expected message actually, right? So whenever you put in incorrect username and incorrect password combination, you're getting this username and password do not match any user in this service. So now, how about what else we had here? We had a username field, right? So if we go ahead and go to our username field and then clear the username field, right? I just cleared the username field, and then I have my login button, and then click on my login button. Now what happens? Now we just tested another scenario where username is empty or blank, right? And then the message that you're receiving is username is required. So now this is your expected condition, right? This is one of the expected conditions that you would be actually automatically testing. And I said at the beginning, you can automatically compare your expected result and then your actual result, right? So imagine your expected result was username is required. That was supposed to show up. Now, how can we actually check that? So to do that, we're going to go ahead and type in here. We're just going to say username is required, or you can copy paste from here. And then we're saying in driver.page source. See, what is driver.page source? Driver.page source is basically the whole, all that code, all that HTML skeleton of the page. So that means if a manual tester would just visually, using their pair of eyes, say, okay, I can see this message, but the automated script, right, since it doesn't have pair of eyes, it has to go ahead and look for that message, look for that text in the HTML skeleton. You have to look for that text or value on the page, and then if you find that, and you can say good, right, passed. So if we hit enter, look what it returned. It returned true, right? This is another interesting data type in any programming language called as Boolean values. Boolean, it's either true or false or 1 or 0. So now, what if it was, I was expecting some other text such as username is not required, just hypothetically, right? And the answer here would be false, right? The answer here would be false. So this is how you actually automatically also compare the expected conditions and your actual result. Now, I also told you that you can take screenshots, right? You can take screenshots. So to take screenshots, we're going to go with driver dot, and this is going to be save screenshot, right? Again, Very, very made, easy to memorize, basically. Driver dot save screenshot, but then we're just going to give a name, but, for the, for your file, right? For your screenshot. So let's give it a name as saying what username is required. So blank username, and then hit. So now I want you to pay attention to this on the left-hand side here where we have our files. That's it. It has to show up. So as you can see, it just created this file here. Now, if I click on this, you can see this file is created, and we just automatically saved the screenshot. So let's try to do that again. This time, let's clear let's enter a value to our username field, actually. Right, so some value to our username field, but clean up our password field. Clean up our password field. And then we can click on the login button. And as you can see, the message here just changed. Now, instead of saying username is required, it says password is required. So we can check that expected condition and actual result here as well. So instead of saying username is required, now I'm going to say password is required. But pay attention. I am, so I'm, deliberately, I just put lowercase letter at the beginning. Password is required. Now, what do you think I'm going to get right now? So if I hit enter, usually, you're expecting that, okay, because this is, I can see the password is required. It's supposed to show true or yes, but it didn't. Because again, the comparison is case sensitive. And if you don't want to deal with the cases, you either have to put the correct value, like, I have to put, correct letter, like password with the capital P, or I can put with the lower P, but then I'll have to apply this, additional method to the source that says lower. So this way, I'm taking all this HTML skeleton off the page and then making it all lowercase so that I don't have to worry about any, capital letters and so on. So now if I, right, so is not required is actually required, right? Password is required. So now it returns true. Okay, so that was the idea. And now let's take a screenshot one more time, but this time we're going to take a screenshot for this new page. So we're going to say driver dot save screenshot, but not blank username, but blank password, and hit enter. And as you can see, we got another another screenshot right here. Now, quick explanation here, just to so that you kind of get an overall idea of what the actual test automation would look like, or what the actual scripts would look like. There would be in its sort of a different way, but this is more I would say for learning purposes, where you can see everything happening step by step. And someone asked a question about debugging yesterday, and this is also a good way of debugging in as in whenever you're performing test automation task, right? Whenever you go with step by step, and then check like, oh, which of my step is actually working or not working, and where am I actually getting an error message, and so on, right? So all right, so I hope it was useful, but now we're going to look into something a bit more, I would say, advanced. So that's something that you don't, you certainly don't expect to understand everything right away. So let me just go to another page here. So this is this is again not a complete framework, but it's sort of an introduction to a next level where now you are not executing or writing your code in the terminal, but your actual code will be in the files here, as you can see. But don't overwhelm yourself with the details here. But and what it can do is it can actually take screenshots and also create reports and create log files. As you can see, I'm just going to clear the logs here. Logs are just the history of what's happening during your test automation, and evidence, you kind of get the idea of evidence. So as part of this test automation script, we're going to interact with the Microsoft Excel document. So let me just go to this Microsoft Excel document and show you what it looks like. So I'm going to bring this over to this screen here. So as you can see, so this is a Microsoft Excel document, and here you have the username, password, and expected text. So think of it as 5 different scenarios or test cases that you might actually execute manually, but you could also do it automatically. So what we're going to do is that we're going to open the page and enter the username and password, and then we're going to check if the product's text is displayed on the page. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same steps with the next combination of user and password, right? So if the user is locked out, then the expected text is, sorry, this user has been locked out, right? If it is incorrect username and password, or the password is missing, then password is required. We just checked it. Now I put the last one as deliberately failing. So I'm saying welcome to homepage, but that's not what you're going to get. So so it's, as I said, it's a bit more next level, and just to give you sort of like an idea of one of the data-driven frameworks and how that looks like. Okay, so with that, we're just going to go ahead and run our script here. So yes, our command is already ready. So let's just go ahead and start. As you can see, it's opening the browser, and it's going to go to a web page. It logged in successfully, right? The first test case passed. Here, as you can see, it passed, and it just gives you percentage here as well. 20% passed, or 40% passed, and so on. Now, you see it's looping. Now that's what we call as a loop in programming. Like yesterday, if you remember, I had this for loop that it created when there was like list of friends, and I wanted to say hello to everybody, right? And that's when I was kind of looping like 4 times, so as many times as as the number of friends that I had. Or also yesterday, I was sort of looping until the kid stopped saying I'm still hungry, right? We just kept feeding the kid until the kid was sort of full before we before they go to sleep. So this is what we call as looping, and this concept is something that you will learn, different types of loops, and it certainly comes with practice. So as you can see, 5 test cases, 4 passed, 1 of them failed, and the evidence has been captured for each of them. Now, if you look at the name of the files, right? Name of the files are not that somebody came up and I didn't put manually. They are created automatically, generate automatically based on the date and time, and you will learn how to do that. And we took all the data here. The data, when I say test data, I mean the username and password from the Excel file. See, so this is how you are now interacting with another another system in your script. So, and we also create logs here, right? So logs are actually, it's a bit more, this is what programmers do, and this is a standard of any application. Behind the scenes, there's some logs that are being generated. This is sort of like a journal of at what time, what happened, what was clicked, right? And how detailed that can be, it's up to you. But here we just, minimized it to saying launch the browser, maximized, and then we're checking if this value was on the page, and then we're going to the next iteration or next test case. So, and we also generated, let me take you there. We also generated a report. As I said, you can also create a report. So if you open it in any browser, this is how the report is going to look like. As you can see, all your test cases, one of them failed. You can see the version of the Python or some, additional information about the environment that you were using, and the details about each test that you ran, the logs, again, and how much time was spent, like what, 15 seconds, 14 seconds for each. And here you have overall metrics here, like 4 test case passed, 1 skipped. You can skip test cases as well, and 0 ended in error, but 1 actually failed.